Okay, for those of you who've seen Wolfman, say whatever you want about the film itself, whether you think it's great or garbage or meh or anywhere in the middle or anywhere in between those things. I'm keeping this poster. What's going on, viewers, is TVB. I know I'm late for this party, but I just got home from seeing Wolfman, the latest, Universal R-rated reimagining of one of their classic movie monsters, the first being Invisible Man, which we got back in 2020, and this once again returning as director is Lay 1L, hope I'm pronouncing his name right. And yeah, like it's this movie, it follows a family, his dad, the mom, the kid. They go to Central Oregon to their secluded farmhouse, but then the Wolfman attacks, and the dad becomes the Wolfman after being bit by the Wolfman. This was one of my most anticipated movies of 2025 because The Invisible Man back in 2020 was one of my favorite films of that year, like right before the pandemic hit and theaters closed. So when I heard that they were like continuing this whole trend of R-rated like movie monsters from Universal Studios, I was like, yes, let's do this. And after seeing the film and reading the mixed reviews that it got on Rotten Tomatoes, I gotta say, I personally was not disappointed by this film, despite its issues. I will say this film is one of those cases of a movie where it's like an hour and a half, but it feels like 2 hours long. I feel like some scenes the pacing was simultaneously too slow and too fast for its own good, because the vast majority of the film takes place in a secluded environment, again, this family just in a farmhouse being terrorized by the Wolfman, and I think that there was some wasted potential with that. There were some things I wish the film did more of, but it chose not to. I think there was just too much emphasis on the transformation aspect of this guy becoming the werewolf, when it should have just been more of the werewolf. And I feel like it could have benefited from a larger cast, if the Wolfman just went on a rampage and killed more people or something like that. And without spoiling it, I wasn't really a fan of the film's ending. But overall, despite those issues, I thought the film, just like Invisible Man, had great performances, and I love the chemistry that, the dad has with his wife and, his daughter. The child actor who plays the kid in this movie is great, and, and there's some really decent, body horror throughout the film, and some scares that did get me. I was kind of freaked out by this film, and if you're a fan of body horror, I really think there's gonna be some scenes that'll please you throughout the Wolfman, and I really feel like that the film looks gorgeous to the cinematography. I've been to Oregon. It's a beautiful state, and I think this film captured the beauty of that state perfectly. And also, there's a neat Native American folklore reference at the start of the film, which I thought was really neat because werewolves have been around legends and mythology all around the world for thousands of years. So I thought it was neat this film tied based on that. And overall, I'm just I'm really again, say whatever you want about this movie, but I'm really hoping that it at least does well enough at the box office for Universal to greenlight more of these kinds of reimaginings of other classic movie monsters. And overall, I have to give Wolfman a 6 out of 9 stars. It's a likable film, and I hear this could be a rumor, this could be confirmed, but I hear that James Wan is making a Creature from the Black Lagoon movie. I'm just hell yes. Alright, so the true chunk of this video, I got a message from Daily Reacts the other day, be like, hey man, I know you haven't watched the show, but could you watch and review the Henry Danger movie that was just released on Paramount Plus, and he'd love to hear my thoughts on it. I was like, yeah, sure. I figured since Daily and I have collaborated with each other quite a few times in the past year and a half, but I remember March of 3 years ago, almost, back in 2022, was the first time he asked me to review a film. He asked me, hey, are you going to see and review Uncharted for us? And I was like, and I decided, I remember back in 2022, back when I was still living in Fort Collins at a place I was staying at before my internships, I made a double review for both Uncharted and The Batman, because they both came out roughly at the same time. I figured, and then later that September, or that August, he asked me again, hey, can you watch Teenage Mutant, the Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie that was on Netflix? And I saw Beast around that same time too, the Idris Elba movie with the lions. I had made that double review. So in the same spirit of both those videos that are turning 3 years old this year, I'm gonna make this video a double review of both Wolfman and Henry Danger the movie. So I'm gonna make this. I got my Paramount Plus right here. And I'm going to make this sort of the same way I've been making a lot of my Turtle Tuesdays episodes, where I'm going to review the movie as I'm watching it. Like, obviously, I'm not going to turn the camera and showcase you guys the film, because, for copyright reasons. But I'll keep the volume low enough, and I will, I'm going to make this not like a live stream, obviously, but like sort of like a live reaction / review of sorts. And from what Daly tells me, he says that all I need to know about the show this movie is based on is that Henry was a sidekick of Captain Man, and he faked his own death, and he has his own power. Yeah, so I need to know because the looks of the trailers and everything, they're not going to spoil the show. Okay, so that's good to hear. Maybe I'll get around to watching the show at some point. Maybe I won't. I remember, I have not watched an episode of Henry Danger, but I think I remember watching one episode of Thundermans, like on Nickelodeon back in middle school, and absolutely hating it, so I kind of just gave up on live action Nickelodeon shows after this. But I've heard good things about this film already, and I've heard good things about the show it's based on, so let's give it a watch. Alright, so I'm currently, at the time I'm recording this, I'm 9 minutes into the film, and already, I like how the intro showcases the narrator just being funny and like recapping events from the show that I assume, and the police guy that started, he's working alongside the female cop, right? And his two friends show up in touristy mode, and they just embarrass him right in front of her because he reveals that he was actually trying to flirt with her, and it's like, that's not flirting. It's like, hey, this cop is totally into you. It's like, you're out of his league, and it's just like, that got me to laugh. Kind of reminds me of how, like, way back in middle school during summer camp, like my friends from that camp and we made like a little fan fiction of sorts for all the Nickelodeon characters, like making like an Avengers-esque superhero team, like all the classic Nicktoons, like SpongeBob, Patrick, Aang, Danny Phantom, etc. Like those classic old school Nick characters, like teaming up to save the world from an alien invasion. And it's just like, what if that ever actually happens? Like, what if there's a legitimate like Nicktoons movie that's like where all the Nicktoons, like maybe take for example just Zuko from Avatar: Last Airbender. He leaves the Airbender verse and enters the real world and finds out like all the Nickelodeon characters are running around LA, and the Nickelodeon villains like Azula and Plankton want to conquer it for themselves, and he goes to Nickelodeon Studios and meets like the creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and they explain to him what's going on. It's like, hey, you can only summon one other character from your show to like join you on this quest. And he's like, hey, I still owe some life-changing field trip. So he picks Toph, right? And then Toph and Zuko team up with SpongeBob and Patrick to, just unite all the Nicktoon heroes and just an action-packed adventure filled to the brim with meta jokes. And there's a fight scene going on right here with some shadowy Grim Reaper dude. That's the thing. My idea for that story, right, that fanfiction that I started way back in middle school, was kind of like, I had it with a PG-13 rating in mind, being the edgy middle schooler that I was back then. I just wanted to be loads of action and violence. But what if, like, we kept the PG-13 rating, not to make it darker necessarily, or more mature or grittier, but just like, hey, make it feel like the characters themselves are, like, growing up with their fans. Because I believe this movie is, I believe this Henry Danger movie is PG, and rightfully so, but me personally, it's like, obviously, a film doesn't need loads of violence or profanity or, like, drug use or sexual content to, like, make it good, right? You don't need a PG-13 or R rating to make it good, but for the past few years, I've been a big fan of the idea of, like, actors or characters, like, that we've known and loved for years, just, like, going from G and PG-rated films or movies or TV shows to, like, PG-13 or R-rated adaptations, as, like, a way to say, like, hey, the characters are growing up with their fans. But it has to be done properly, though. I've been a pretty big fan of that concept lately. Okie dokie. I am at the 40-minute mark, roughly, in the Henry Danger movie, and they're in the alternate universe with Missy Martin, I think that's her name is. Yeah, in one of her, like, imaginary worlds where, like, Schwoz is a dishwasher. It's so fitting because, Daly, I know you're currently a dishwasher at a restaurant, so I think it's funny how a character who is one of Henry's best friends in, like, his universe, right, is not, like, it is, like, a total stranger to him and another. I think the whole multiverse concept, something we've seen plenty of times before in recent years, but it's done arguably better than the MCU is doing it and other film franchises that kind of just, like, shoehorn it into their movies nowadays, I feel like. And yeah, I love how this film already is, like, playing with kids' imaginations, Because I've always wondered what it'd be like if one of my like fantasy or sci-fi stories like became reality at some point. So this film was like, excuse me, playing with that concept, but better than other movies are nowadays. All right, I just wanted to say this. I'm like at the hour mark in this film when they just they're in the Mad Max like world where like the Canadian guys want to like take what's left of the maple syrup, and Henry's finally realizing like how important Jasper was to him, or whatever his best friend's name is, and in his world. So it's like, okay, we're gonna stand here and fight. It's like the Canadian guys want maple syrup. It's like, ask and you shall receive. They start playing Pat Benatar and they're punching them in the nuts, and then they just get hosed like hydro pumped with just maple syrup. Just genius. Villains in movies, they tend to be destroyed by very power that they seek. That's a cliche that's, it's cliche, but you can use it, like, properly. Like, Puss in Boots' Last Wish, great example of that. And, like, I got kind of back to me wanting to, write fantasy and sci-fi. Like I said, I like to imagine, what would be like if my stories became reality. And I've always had ideas for, like, if I ever do, like, decide to make, like, if they ever get film adaptations for whatever reason, I imagine, like, what soundtrack go really hand in hand with it. Like, because I saw Beartooth in concert this past weekend, and, like, I got hooked on them in Nebraska, which, by the way, tomorrow, January 25th, is going to be 2 years since I ended my internship in Nebraska, which to me is just insane because a keeper I met at that zoo got me hooked on Beartooth and a lot of other bands, like, metal, hard rock, alternative, emo, punk bands, like A Day to Remember, or Atreyu, bands like that. And Beartooth was one of them. I listened to them, like, all the time while door dashing and working at the pet resort, during my YouTube hiatus, or, like, interning at the Utica Zoo after that, and, like, door dashing in Milburn, being back at my dad's house in New Jersey, just, like, trying to make life work before I moved here to Columbus. I didn't even know Beartooth was from Columbus until I moved here, right? I'm going to talk a lot more in depth about that concert, showcase some footage in my next Schizo Rambling video, but yeah, I listen to Beartooth and bands similar to them all the time while, like, drawing dinosaurs and doing, like, concept art for, my, like, fantasy series that I started during my internship at the Utica Zoo. And, like, I just imagine, like, the song In Between being played, as, like, my characters, riding pet dinosaurs on a hunt or something like that. Just up on a mountain, it sees down below, it's easy to lose your self-control. And it's like, yes. Also, another thing that I wanted to say, you briefly see him go into the animated world, and it kind of reminds me of the Victorious episode that I watched recently, because I splurged Victorious within the past month and a half. There's that one episode where how Trina got into Hollywood Arts, and basically Psychowitz drinks bad coconut milk, and basically goes on Nickelodeon's equivalent of, like, an acid trip. Yeah, that's what happens in this movie when the animated world, what it looks like. I was just like, Nickelodeon, how do you keep getting away? Like, you don't even need Dan Schneider to get away with, like, adult references. Like, how do you keep sneaking acid trips in these kids shows and kids movies? Explain. Okay, so I'm watching the credits. The ending, without spoiling it, obviously, it's excellent. Yeah, like, I hope they do another one of these movies. So yeah, I gotta say, Daily, when you asked me to watch and review Henry Danger the movie on Paramount Plus, I wasn't really expecting that much from it, again, because I've never watched the show, but, like, if you have Paramount Plus, I would highly suggest checking out Henry Danger the movie. Whether you've seen the show that it's based on or not, I think it's, it's great fun for the whole family, great action scenes, great, good, solid writing, engaging characters, really, really, really imaginative, like, engaging premise. Yeah, what more do you need? Alright, Henry Danger, the movie, I gotta say, it earns a 7 out of 9 stars. It's a really likable film, and as of now, it's my pick for best movie 2025, but, like, it's only January, so we'll see how well things play out, I guess. And yeah, I'm gonna, and I'd like, also my February Schizo Rambling, I'm gonna talk about, the Beartooth concert, and I'm gonna talk about the Oscar nominees, and Go Wild Robot. And just, like, there's some things I want to talk about more on my New Year's Day Schizo Rambling, but didn't really get to do so, unfortunately, because I didn't want to, I forgot to do so, and two, there's, like, I didn't want that video to go on for super duper long. So, yeah. Man, I think out of all the Januaries I've ever lived, I think this one's been my favorite. personally. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching this video. And Daily, thanks again for suggesting me to watch Henry Danger the movie. And yeah, I'll catch you guys later. Stay beastly. Have a good night.